Greetings, welcome back to Old Ways Rising Farm YouTube channel, where I am currently holding a pile of hides that are smoked brain tan. Now, the purpose of these is to make some clothing out of them. A shirt, some leggings, a bunch of stuff. Okay? We've already talked on the channel extensively about how to make these. I'll put a link at the top of the screen for that playlist if you haven't seen these. But I want to make a cutout pattern shirt as part of this overall project. And that's a new skill for me. I'm learning from a wonderful seamstress who also happens to be my mom. And the shirt that I'm working on is this partially finished prototype, which is currently draped over my shoulders. Obviously partially finished. But the next stage on this is I need to do buttons and buttonholes. And I need to make some buttons. I decided it would be fun for this, and would fit well with the style of this shirt, to do some antler buttons. And I thought you might like to come along for that ride. So let's get into it, and I'll show you how to make some antler buttons. So to make some antler buttons, we need some antler. And I do want to talk about this a minute. This is just a little piece of cut off tine out of a dog chew box, right? You can go to the most pet stores. It's all the rage now to get these chunks of antler for dog chews. This is a really easy material to obtain. But you do want to make sure you get one that's ultimately going to be usable. And what you want to look at is not this horizontal silhouette to decide if you have enough material. You want to look at the end grain. And this is a big advantage to buying your antlers from a pet store as dog chews, because they'll always have a cut here. And when you look at this one, you can see there's two regions of material. Let me grab a pointer. You have the darker outer region and then a lighter colored inner region. And on this antler, that lighter inner region is very, very solid. Okay, because this is probably whitetail. Whitetail deer, blacktail deer are really good, solid antler. So is moose. Now, if you're watching this from Europe, what I call a moose, you call an elk. If you're watching this from North America and you see somebody from Europe talk about elk, they're talking about moose. And that's important because the true deer, of which the elk and the European red deer are, have absolutely terrible antlers for any kind of carving. It is super, super, super spongy on the inside. And you'll look at a piece of elk antler cut in cross section. I'm a North American, remember, that's whoopity to you Europeans out there. It's super spongy in cross section. It's absolute garbage for carving. Now, most of the antler chews are being bought from a Boy Scout troop who raises all of their money out in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, collecting what we North Americans call elk antlers, and they get cut up for chews. And it's the wealthiest Boy Scout troop in the world because they do that fundraiser. That's where most of your dog chews come from. So you don't want that kind of what North Americans call elk antler. Now, moose is superlative, wonderful, beautiful material for carving. Okay? So you Europeans go get your moose antler, or your elk antlers, because it'll be great stuff. But common names are terrible, right? Genus Alces, genus Odocoelis, good for carving. Okay? Genus Cervus, bad for carving. Okay? So you want to make sure, look at this end grain and make sure you actually have solid stuff in there. And I've marked just 5 cut lines. And this is just like cutting cookies from a tree. I'm just going to hold this against a carving cradle. And I'm going to cut, not square to the carving cradle, but square to the existing face of this piece of antler. Okay, it's kind of fiddly and not the easiest thing to hold. Just go slow and you'll get through it. I'm just using a common hacksaw here. Okay? And it really doesn't take too long to cut a wafer like this with hand tools. It's a pretty simple thing. We've got a relatively thin wafer. It's strong stuff. It's not going to snap. Okay? So I am going to A, recharge the camera battery, and B, do this 4 more times. So here we go. I know I said I was going to cut 5, but I cut an extra 1, just because once in a while when you drill the holes, you'll have some split out problems. Okay? Also, I was pondering while I was doing this, the Europeans call what we call elk deer, which makes it even more confusing, right? So I've seen on forums people like show a picture of an antler, and like people that you could tell from both sides of the pond literally arguing over what is and is not a deer, right? For the record, elk are true deer and white-tailed deer aren't, so the Europeans are a little more correct, but common names are arbitrary no matter how you cut it. So Latin is good. Anyway, I marked where the 2 holes are going to be. When you're picking a drill bit for this, you have to keep in mind that you've got to get your needle through the hole with multiple passes of thread. So when you're sewing on your button, you're going through those holes a half dozen times or so, and you're going to build up some mass there. So you need a little bit of extra airspace. At the same time, you don't want such a big hole that you're weakening the antler too much and risking split out, because antler can be brittle. So I have a drill bit that will drill a hole just about the size of them black dots, and just going to very slowly, very carefully poke a hole through it. Okay? It was a little bit off center. It'll still be fine. Okay? There's the second. Do this. I got that one a little crooked wonky. But as I said, I made an extra. This one was right on, that one drifted a bit. Do this on a sacrifice block. You don't want to poke all of these holes in your nice table. But it is just fine to do this by hand. And then when you're done, we're just going to go to sandpaper. And on a coarse grit, I like to use an emery cloth for this because it goes very, very quickly. That's already finished. I've removed all but just 3 or 4 of the saw marks. Anyway, as I've said many times on this channel, get good sandpaper. I like this emery cloth and wet dry garnet paper as my sandpapers of choice. These are intended for use in metal crafts, and it holds up. Now, since I got my holes a little bit wonky, I'm not going to do all of the work to finish this, but I'll use something on the order of 80 to 120 grit for initial scratch removal, and then this nice 220 grit garnet paper to do a final finish. I don't usually take anything in bone much higher than 220 grit because it won't hold a shine anyway, right? It's just kind of a waste of effort. Mm-hmm. But once we have these flats sanded nice and smooth, and there's still 2 scratches in that one, but I don't care, this is an extra one, we want to take a little bit of time and bevel all of those edges nice. Okay? So we have nice rounded smooth edges, and we'll want to take this in hand and go over those side flats. This is optional, and it's going to depend on how nice the exterior of your antler is. You can see this one has been out in the sun for a while, right? So before this became a dog chew, it was either laying on the ground or screwed to somebody's garage door for some unknown period of time. I obviously don't know its history. So it's got kind of a chalky exterior, so I'm going to sand the edges of these all nice and get down to clean material. Okay. Now this is just a nice, long, boring, repetitive process that I'm going to do off camera, but I will show you the final collection when they're finished. We got us some buttons. These have been sanded both faces, the edges chamfered, the smoothed off with the 220 grit. I do want to mention one thing here. There are a couple of these. That's one of them. I doubt the camera is going to pick it up, but there's a big scratch right there. And what happened is when these were cut, the saw went through, so there's a little bit of a concavity there, okay, on the one side. And if I sand it down enough to get rid of that scratch, it's going to be thinner than I want. But the other side is perfect, and it's a button, so that one just has a front and a back side, and that's totally okay. It's a natural product. It's made with hand tools. Everyone's going to be a little different. There will be imperfections. That's part of, I mean, really, part of doing a folk art and using hand tools for these sorts of projects is so that it doesn't look like it was machine-made clones of everything else out there, right? Now, the last little thing I want to do on these is these little corners are sometimes sharp. Well, we don't want that to cut through the thread when we sew them on our shirt. So I'm just going to take a drill bit that's, don't overthink this. It's on the order of twice the size of the original. Okay? And I'm just going to, with my fingers, spin it around in that opening a couple of times, just to ease off the corner and make sure there aren't any sharp cutty bits. Okay, that's your technical term for the day, sharp cutty bits. Remember that. There will be a test, at least a quiz. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to finish up all 5 of these and the shirt, and we'll look at what everything looks like fully assembled here in a second. Well, the shirt isn't quite all the way done, as you can see by the fact that things are still pinned together, but the buttons are. And I wanted to quick sew them on so that I could show the conclusion to the button project actually used in something. So I think they came out quite nice. It's a really nice little project. It doesn't take a lot of material. These tines are readily available, right? You can go to reenactments, Ren fairs, all sorts of different things, powwows, black powder shooting events, craft shows, knife shows. There's a lot of places where people are trading in these times, right? Both historical and present, forward-looking, right, types of events, right? Like powwows are forward-looking. So look for these, get these. Pet stores, right? Obviously pet stores. Do make sure that you get one that has a nice solid core, like I had mentioned in the earlier clips, right? That's very, very important. If you get one from like American elk or any of the other true deer, you're not going to be so happy. You've got to get one that has a solid core. So I do recommend that you look at it physically and inspect it, or communicate with the person you're buying it from if you're going to mail order something like this, and make sure you know what species it actually came from. You tell them what you're doing. There's still at least one or more projects in here, right? This could be a little handle for something, or more buttons, or toggles, or I don't know what I'll do with it. But there's a lot more material there, so it doesn't take a lot. It's a nice little project. So I hope you've enjoyed this and got something out of it. If you're so inclined and wanted to help out the channel, help us to get materials and have more time to put into things like this, you can wander on over to the Patreon, link at the bottom of the screen. And I hope that you have a wonderful, blessed day, and I'll see you next time here at Old Ways Rising Farm.